Sarah Bell arrived at the Walker Ranch with one small carpet bag, two trembling hands, and a promise she had never wanted to make. The Kansas wind pushed dust across the road as the wagon stopped before the largest house she had ever seen. It stood beyond a line of cottonwood trees, wide and white, with a deep porch, glass windows, and a red barn bigger than the church back in town. Sarah was 18, slight, quiet, and used to lowering her eyes before anyone could judge her. Her faded brown dress had been mended so many times that the stitches looked like tiny roads across the cloth. In her bag were 3 dresses, a Bible that had belonged to her mother, and a folded scrap of paper signed by her step-uncle, Horace Bell. The paper said she owed him money. The truth was worse. Horace had taken her 2 younger brothers into his house after her mother died. Then he said the family debt was Sarah's burden now. If she did not agree to marry Caleb Walker, the richest cattleman near Cedar Ridge, Horace would send the boys away to work farms in separate counties. So Sarah had agreed. Not because she loved Caleb. She had never even met him. She agreed because her brothers were 10 and 12, and both still cried in their sleep when thunder shook the roof. The driver climbed down and lifted her carpet bag from the wagon. "This is it, miss." Sarah swallowed, "Thank you." Before she could ask where to go, the front door opened. Caleb Walker stepped onto the porch. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a clean white shirt with a dark vest. His face was sun-browned, serious, and too still for comfort. He looked like a man who had learned not to show surprise, not to show hurt, and not to trust anything that came too easily. Sarah's heart beat so hard she feared he could see it. This was the man she had promised to marry. Caleb came down the porch steps and took off his hat. "Miss Bell." "Yes, sir." His eyes moved to the carpet bag, then back to her face. He did not look pleased. He did not look cruel either. That somehow made her more nervous. "I was told you understood the arrangement," he said. Sarah gripped her gloves. "My uncle said you needed a wife." A shadow crossed Caleb's face. "Your uncle says many things." That answer startled her. Behind Caleb, an older woman with silver hair and a flour-dusted apron appeared in the doorway. Her eyes softened when she saw Sarah. "This poor child looks ready to faint," the woman said. "Bring her in before the wind carries her back to town." Caleb stepped aside. "Mrs. Pike runs the house. She will show you your room." Sarah looked at him carefully. "My room." His jaw tightened, as if the question bothered him. "Yes," he said, "your own room until you decide what you want." Sarah blinked. No one had asked what she wanted in a long time. Inside, the house smelled of coffee, pine wood, and clean linen. It was not fancy in the way Sarah had imagined rich people lived. It was neat, quiet, and lonely. A pair of little shoes sat near the hearth. A small wooden doll rested on a chair, one arm cracked and tied with blue thread. Sarah noticed Caleb glance toward it and then quickly look away. Mrs. Pike took Sarah upstairs to a plain but warm room with a small bed, a washstand, and a window facing the creek. "You'll be safe here," she said. "Safe?" The word nearly broke Sarah. She turned toward the window before Mrs. Pike could see her eyes fill. That evening, Sarah came downstairs after washing the travel dust from her face. Caleb stood near the hearth with a little girl asleep in his arms. She could not have been more than 4. Her dark curls fell against his shoulder, and one hand clutched his collar. "This is Lily," Mrs. Pike whispered, "his sister's child." Caleb heard and looked up. "She lost her mother last spring." Sarah's fear softened into something else. "I'm sorry." Caleb nodded once, but his eyes stayed guarded. At supper he sat across from Sarah at the long table. There was beef stew, warm bread, and apple preserves. Sarah ate carefully, afraid of seeming hungry. Caleb noticed anyway. "You don't have to count bites here," he said quietly. Her spoon froze. I was. You were. Heat climbed into her cheeks. He leaned back. Miss Bell, I know your uncle thinks this house is a place where he can settle accounts. It is not. I did not buy you. Sarah looked up then. The words struck deeper than kindness. My brothers, she whispered. He said if I refused. I know what he said, Caleb's voice darkened, and I intend to speak with him. Fear flashed through her. Please don't anger him. He can be cruel when crossed. Caleb's face hardened. So can I. The room fell quiet. After supper, Sarah asked Mrs. Pike for work. She could not sit in a rich man's house and do nothing. The older woman gave her a basket of torn linens and led her to a small sewing table near the parlor. At the bottom of the basket, Sarah found something wrapped in tissue. A white wedding veil. It was torn along one side, yellowed with age and stitched with delicate blue thread. Sarah touched it with care. Something about it made her chest ache. That belonged to Mr. Walker's sister, Mrs. Pike said softly from the doorway. Lily's mother. Sarah should have put it away. Instead, she threaded a needle. The house grew quiet. The clock ticked. Wind brushed the porch boards outside. Sarah worked by lantern light, making each stitch small and careful. She did not know when tears began sliding down her face. She was thinking of her own mother. Thinking of the shame Horace had placed on her grave. Thinking of two little boys waiting for Sarah to save them. A floorboard creaked. Sarah looked up. Caleb stood in the doorway, his face unreadable as he stared at the veil in her hands. I'm sorry, Sarah said quickly. I should not have touched it. He walked closer, slow and silent. For one terrible moment, she thought he would take it from her. Instead, he looked at the blue stitches and whispered, My sister used to sew with that color. Sarah held the veil out. It was torn. So were we, he said. The words hung between them. For the first time, Sarah saw not a rich cowboy, not a stranger, not the man tied to her debt. She saw someone lonely. Someone hurt. Someone who understood loss. Then Caleb noticed the old Bible beside her, the one with her mother's name faded inside the cover. His eyes narrowed at a loose paper tucked between its pages. What is that? Sarah pulled it free. Her breath caught. It was a church receipt, old and fragile, signed by Reverend Pike. Beneath her mother's name were the words, Charity Fund donation received in full. Sarah's hands began to shake. Because Horace had always said her mother stole from that very fund. Caleb looked from the paper to Sarah's pale face. And in the silence, both of them understood the same thing. Her mother's disgrace might have been a lie. Sarah did not sleep much that night. The old church receipt lay on the table between her and Caleb until the lantern burned low. Her mother's name, Mary Bell, sat plain on the paper, neat and innocent. Sarah read it again and again, waiting for the words to change. They did not. Charity Fund donation received in full. For 6 years, Horace Bell had told everyone that Sarah's mother had stolen from the church charity box before she died. He said the shame had ruined the family name. He said Sarah owed him for paying back what her mother had taken. But the receipt said different. Caleb stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out toward the dark creek. Your uncle built a debt from a lie. Sarah's throat tightened. Then my brothers are still under his roof because of a lie. Caleb turned. His face was hard, but his voice was gentle. Not for long. The next morning, Sarah worked in the kitchen with Mrs. Pike while Lily sat at the table, drawing crooked flowers on scrap paper. Sarah tried to keep her hands steady, but every sound from the yard made her look toward the window. Caleb had ridden into Cedar Ridge to speak with Reverend Samuel Pike, Mrs. Pike's brother, and the church record keeper. By noon, he returned with dust on his coat, and something dangerous in his eyes. "He has the ledger," Caleb said. Sarah nearly dropped the tin cup in her hand. "The church ledger." Caleb nodded. "Reverend Pike said he remembers your mother, said she came to the church with money wrapped in a blue cloth. She paid every cent she owed, but Horace took charge of the records after that." Mrs. Pike made a sharp sound. "I knew that man had rot in him." Sarah sank into a chair. "Then why did no one defend Mama?" Caleb's face softened. "Because powerful men know how to make honest people afraid." Those words stayed with Sarah through the following days. Caleb sent a rider to bring her brothers safely to the ranch, but Horace refused to release them. Instead, he sent back a message folded in clean paper. The girl made her bargain. If she breaks it, the boys pay. Sarah read the line once, then twice. Her fear returned like cold water down her back. That evening, Caleb found her in the parlor, mending the torn wedding veil again. Her stitches were smaller now, blue thread moving through white netting like a thin river of hope. "You do that when you're afraid," he said. Sarah looked up. "So? Fix things that were not yours to break." Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "If I had been stronger, I could have taken the boys and left. You were a child. I am still treated like one." Caleb stepped closer, then stopped, as if careful not to crowd her. "Not by me." The words settled in her heart with a warmth she did not trust. The next day was the church charity supper. Reverend Pike had asked Caleb to come, bringing Sarah with him. The ledger would be shown there, before the donors and families who had once believed Horace's story. Sarah wore a plain cream dress Mrs. Pike had altered for her. Her hands shook as she tied her bonnet. Caleb waited by the wagon. When he saw her, something changed in his face. "You look brave," he said. Sarah gave a small, sad smile. "I was hoping to look invisible." "Not tonight." Cedar Ridge Church glowed with lantern light when they arrived. Long tables were covered with pies, beans, bread, and coffee pots. Women whispered. Men turned their heads. Everyone knew Sarah Bell, or they thought they did. Horace stood near the front, polished boots shining, gray coat buttoned tight. Her brothers were beside him, pale and silent. Sarah moved toward them, but Horace lifted one finger. "Not yet," he said softly. Caleb's hand tightened near his side. Reverend Pike stepped forward with the old ledger tucked beneath his arm, but Horace spoke first. "Before this supper becomes a stage for lies," Horace said loudly, "this town should know what is happening. My niece has taken shelter under a rich man's roof and now brings accusations against the only family who fed her." Murmurs spread through the room. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she stood still. Horace smiled like a knife. "Her mother brought shame to our name. Now the daughter hopes a wealthy husband can wash it clean." Caleb stepped forward, careful. Horace ignored him. "Ask her why she agreed to marry him. Love, no, money, protection. She sold herself to escape a debt." Sarah flinched as if struck. Caleb's voice dropped. "Say one more word against her, and every man here will know what kind of coward hides behind a girl's sorrow." "Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'm really curious to know." Reverend Pike opened the ledger. His voice shook, but he spoke clearly. "Mary Bell did not steal from the charity fund. She repaid it in full, and after her death, more money disappeared under Horace Bell's keeping." The church went silent. Horace's smile vanished. Then he reached for Sarah's youngest brother and pulled him close. "This is not over." Thunder cracked outside. The church doors blew open. And in the sudden storm wind, the ledger pages scattered across the floor like truth finally set loose. The storm turned Cedar Ridge Church into a room full of shadows and frightened faces. Ledger pages slid across the wooden floor. Women gasped. Men bent to catch them. Horace Bell tightened his grip on Sarah's little brother, Jacob, while the boy stared at Sarah with wide, scared eyes. Sarah's fear burned away. "Let him go," she said. Horace gave a thin laugh. "You forget your place." Caleb stepped beside her, but Sarah raised one hand. For once, she did not want anyone to speak for her. "No," she said, voice shaking but clear. "You made me forget it. You told me I was shame. You told me Mama stole. You used my brothers like chains." The church fell silent. Reverend Pike gathered the main ledger and held it high. "The records are plain. Mary Bell repaid the charity money. After her death, the missing amounts continued under Horace Bell's hand." Horace backed toward the open door. "Old ink proves nothing." Mrs. Pike stepped forward then, holding the repaired white veil with blue stitching. "This proves the girl's heart. She mended what grief tore. You tore people apart." Thunder struck close. In the confusion, Horace shoved Jacob toward Sarah and ran into the rain. Caleb moved fast, but Sarah caught his sleeve. "The boys first." That choice changed everything. Caleb stopped chasing Horace and helped Sarah gather both brothers into his wagon. They were soaked, crying, and safe. Reverend Pike sent men after Horace, but the storm swallowed him before they reached the road. Then a shout came from outside. "The schoolhouse!" Sarah turned. Across the muddy street, the half-built schoolhouse beside the church glowed with lanterns for the fundraiser. Wind had torn one wall loose. If it fell, the roof would follow, and every donated board would be ruined. Horace had not only run. He had cut the support ropes. Caleb looked at Sarah. "Stay with the boys." But Sarah was already moving. "That school is for boys like mine." They ran through the rain together. Inside the unfinished schoolhouse, lanterns swung from beams. Rain blew through open windows. Men pushed against the shaking wall, but fear made them weak. Caleb grabbed a rope and shouted orders. Sarah saw the torn veil still in Mrs. Pike's hands. Without thinking, she took it, folded it thick, and wrapped it around Caleb's bleeding palm where the rope had burned him. He looked at her, stunned. "You keep saving pieces of me," he said. "And you keep giving me a place to stand," she answered. Together they pulled. One by one, townsmen joined. Reverend Pike, the baker, the blacksmith, even men who had once believed Horace's lies. The wall groaned, then settled back into place. By midnight, Horace was caught near the dry creek crossing with church coins sewn inside his coat lining. The ledger, the witnesses, and the stolen money ended his power for good. Sarah's brothers were released from his claim, and the town that had whispered against Mary Bell finally spoke her name with respect. Days later, sunlight returned to Cedar Ridge. The schoolhouse was finished first, before anyone spoke of weddings or debts. Sarah stood inside the front room, holding the repaired veil. Caleb stood beside her, clean-shirted and quiet, with Lily holding his hand and Sarah's brothers peeking through the doorway. "There was never a debt between us," Caleb said softly. Sarah looked at him. "Then what are we now?" His guarded face opened at last. "Whatever you choose." Sarah smiled through tears. "Then I choose to stay." Together, they hung the white veil with blue stitching in the front window as the schoolhouse's first curtain. Lantern light passed through it, soft and golden, while children laughed behind them. And for the first time in Sarah Bell's life, nothing in her heart felt borrowed.